I want to update some of my thoughts on the investigation into the super story that I discovered in researching cinema. But first, I want to thank my friends at Weaponized News for expressing their concern about my whereabouts. I've moved into assisted living, and the Wi Fi signal um, has precluded my being able to follow the news broadcast until the second half. Further, my mother died, so I have been out of sorts. One of the things that came up towards the end of my stay in the Section 8 apartment, when I was resolving my certainty about my research's validity and relevance, which allowed me to surrender to the imprecations of my care manager that I please make the transition to assisted living for my own safety and welfare. Instead, I came across the Society of Ouspensky and Gurdjieff thinking that took root in Harlem. I wasn't expecting that. And I found a book about it, which deals with novelists who were involved. Gene Toomer, George Schuyler, Zora Neale Hurston. I found an interesting explanation for what these people mean by Ouspensky's Superman. The author of the book said that they meant people who had sufficient understanding of history that they could manipulate events. These are all novelists. Now, I knew from the study of cinema what they had done, but I didn't see who they were at first. I had to go put some elbow grease into researching the fourth dimensional psychology that emerged with the early era of cinema and in the Cubist movement, the Italian futurists. And I came upon a familiar problem which recurs in the study of Harlem, which is that at the dawn of cinema, to my awareness anyway, it wasn't literature was established and taken more seriously than cinema was when it first started. It took some time before literary figures like Thomas Mann began gravitating towards Hollywood. But there were people behind the scenes who took cinema very seriously. And I found a literary figure in the background of the Cubist movement named Blas Sanders, who I've said a book recently was published with the revealing title of The Invention of Life about. So you could see the definition that I believe his name is John Woodson. I may have to correct that in the future broadcast. I have the book, it's back there. It says that their idea of a Superman is people who understand events so well that they can manipulate them. And why I felt that the title, The Invention of Life, is very revealing about this crowd. So the semiotic super story actually is discussed more or less openly in the 1910s in the New Age magazine. They used the term super production. Ouspensky contributes to these articles. And they talk about it as a staging an apocalypse. So, the Italian futurists may have gotten their hands on the New Testament and said this is a script for a major motion picture that we can use in real time. and establish our dominion. The superproduction was a Mount Everest of what people were going to believe, using media to manipulate them psychologically. And of course, Alan Dulles made Cecil B. DeMille, the great biblicist of Hollywood, into the leader of Radio Free Europe after World War II, which was in tandem with Operation Paperclip, which Weaponized News discusses. You can do a search of the archives. So there is a modern contemporary American intellectual movement, veterans with experience in the arts who are concerned about our Commonwealth, who go into these stories and see through the gaslighting to the truth of some of them. And in this um, undisclosed mindset is the idea that somehow, rather than being a democracy, we're a gaggle of voters slash acolytes playing roles for higher powers. And my goal is to disclose some of these idiosyncrasies. And of course, the catching point is that I believe that John Lennon was involved in the pulled a Houdini. I believe that's where it leads. I didn't always believe that. At one point, I sincerely believed that he had been victimized by it, but I no longer do. It's too enveloping of his contribution, and it required his role too conspicuously. He was in a film called How I Won the War, and this is the real story of how he proposes to have his coterie at large in Dominion. And I have been punished for that. I'm not disclosing that, but I'm a library clerk. I've done elbow grease research. I was one of the few people in the library who did not want to throw away the card catalog. I missed the newspaper men with the card tucked in their hat who would come in and rifle the card catalog, who were very good at independent research and fact checking, corroboration. And I hear these stories about artificial intelligence erasing history. I don't know whether they're true, but a lot of people are talking about these things. So I'm encouraged that some of the people who know what I've been through and am on to want me to stay in touch and keep them updated and have um, affirmed an interest in supportive ways to my sometimes acerbic isolation. Um, as for the role that I was cast in, I don't take it as anything other than the bent of the people who are pulling the stunt. You know, the idea that Harlem Renaissance was involved, those people were novelists. It's hard to find cinema links. I'm working on sources to it. I mean, Nat King Cole came to mind because he worked with Errol Flynn, but the Gurdjieff Society would impinge theatrical manipulations of a person who they claimed to have objective views of the personality about. And they weren't disclosing that they were deliberately being manipulative of this person. It's like a forensic assertive gaslighting routine. And when I looked it over, I would have to say that if Nat King Cole was being jockeyed by the Rat Pack of Hollywood, the Vegas Hollywood Nexus, he probably was completely innocent in the matter. And um, the duplicity that is involved allows people to say the Israeli slogan, no one is innocent, because they conjure a role that a person is identified by necessity to play. And it's not what's objectively true, it's just what people believe or want to believe about that person. And, Obama played the second mirror game on me with the two virgins war game. And one of the things I do find in the Harlem Renaissance intellectuals is George Schuyler, at least, believed in miscegenation as an answer. I believe in tolerance of consensual romance as the answer. I don't believe in trafficking. Or Gail Burson used to say, someone I like, I have a crush on. I wonder what's going to make them, I forget how she put it, but make return the affections. That's, like she has another refrain that says, she gets bad headaches, but she behaves better now. These are trafficking innuendos. And I don't believe that, I mean, if you look at what Endor and Midori did theatrically, it's completely within the spectrum of strategic analysis that a woman would make love to somebody undercover for a mafia or an army institution. But that's not what you would call ethical character. It's not what you would consider to be, well, it may be the majority's morality, but it's not what would be rightly understood as a moral culture. And I think that bullying into romance, as common as it is a part of the problem that America's reputation is in such a downward slide. And what they resented about me was that I resisted that. That's where the role playing operation came into definition. And it was a tragedy for me to be cast in a situation by a gang who were engaging in what they called forces impinging on the persona's experience. There is literature in this book about the Harlem Renaissance, scourge of society, which describes the sort of situation that there may be a source for, showing that Hollywood cinema screenplay writers might have been keeping some of the actors or actresses in the dark as to the actual role that they were playing. In other words, I'm not sure that the cast in which the film's semiotic super stories of three mirrors are visible in the background of international cinema all knew that that was going on in the background.